Hey, what's up guys, this is Alex. Today we're gonna talk about orchestral mixing again. We're gonna talk about EQ and frequency spectrum analyzers. Complicated word. But yeah, these two things tie in together well because they pretty much help you manage the same thing, which are frequencies. Now the EQ is pretty much an advanced volume unit, you can see it as that. It helps you increase or attenuate very specific frequency ranges as volume, while the spectrum analyzers help you understand what's going on inside your tracks in terms of frequencies. What frequencies need attenuation, what frequencies need increasing, and stuff like that. It helps you understand what's going on in your track and why it sounds like it does. If you use these two tools together, you're gonna master equalizing in a very short amount of time. Now, I want to first start by defining this spectrum analyzer, how it works, what it is, and what the single frequency ranges represent. And this is gonna be just a basic outline of information. If you want really scientific information about frequencies, etc., you might want to check out, the manuals for spectrum analyzer. For example, I think Isotope, the company who made Isotope Ozone, has a whole manual on mixing and mastering stuff where they go really in depth about the technical sides of things. But today I'm going to deploy new knowledge which is going to help you understand how to equalize and even how to orchestrate your tracks, because if you learn how to read a spectrum analyzer, your orchestration is going to increase in terms of quality a lot. So this thing here is pretty much a graph that represents the same graph which you see in the EQ. So X and Y axis, the X axis is represents the frequencies, goes from 20 to 20 kilohertz generally speaking. Then we have the Y axis that represents the decibels. The lower the decibels are, the lowest the sound is, the higher the decibel are, the loudest the sound is. So when you see a frequency range in an orchestral setting, it tends to look like this. In a very clear orchestral track, you see this curve, like this shape. It's very even. It doesn't have strange spikes all over the place. It's very even, easy to follow. And another thing you see is that the type of frequencies that have the highest peak in a track that sounds clear. If you import a professionally mixed and mastered track inside your DAW and put it inside a spectrum analyzer, you're gonna see that the frequencies that have the highest peak tend to be the low ones. The low frequencies tend to be the ones with the highest peak in decibels, for the most part. While if you have parts in your track where that is not true, that's a good indicator there's some mixing that you need to do, some balancing you need to apply, either in instrumentation or with EQ. For example, this track I haven't mixed it, so in some parts the highest frequencies are actually the mid ones. Like in here, you see the peak is reached by these ones. So in here I know, for example, the frequency spectrum suggests me that I need to do some attenuation in here. And a cool thing to do is to just isolate that part and see what's going on in there. So you can do that in Span by clicking Control on your keyboard and left click on your mouse. So I know exactly what I need to work on: the bass trombone and a bit of the higher string, like the violas, etc., to make this part more balanced. So this is just an example of how you can use a spectrum analyzer. Now I want to first talk about how to read it, how to interpret every single frequency and range of frequency. Range of frequencies, and what every single range of frequencies does, what it serves to the track, before we talk about EQ. Now, let's analyze this part, and let's analyze every single frequency range. Now, the first one is the low or sub, which goes from 20 Hz to around 100 or 80 actually. and it has the lowest sounds, so the boom of the percussion mostly. This is what it sounds like. So it mostly features the very lowest sounds. So again, the boom of the percussion is highly populating this area, and also the sub bass, but there are no sub basses in this track. So this is the low end. If we were to remove this part, it would, like, the track would sound completely funny. Like, that sounds pretty much like out of a telephone, you know. So that's not good. And those frequencies are really important because they represent the body of the back end of the track. And yeah, then we have from 100 to around 300, which are the low mid frequencies. What you heard in there was mostly the snare, the snappy type of percussion. In this part, the snappy percussion are represented by the snare. So this is the boom, and this is with the snap. While orchestral instruments are still not that popular in the low mid frequency range, in here you mostly hear a bit of the low ones, so for example cellos, etc. But that's about it. Now this part is also, as I said, mostly populated by percussion. It helps you understand how much, like, if you, for example, have some percussion that sound boomish but also kind of weak, like they do not have the type of snap, they do not slap you in the face. That might be because they lack frequencies around this range. For example, if I were to yeah, maybe do this. I'm not sure if this is gonna serve as an example, but okay, around here, like the snap is not that much present. So one thing you can do, for example, in here is you can just go into EQ and increase the snap yourself. But unless the raw material, like the percussion, has an inkling of that quality in it, you're just gonna boost reverb and all those stuff, you know, like you're gonna boost additional signal, not the actual percussion. So it's not gonna provide the snap. So one cool thing you can do is actually provide it yourself by adding other sounds. So in here, I think there's a snare or stuff like that, which add up to those frequencies, because the snare is a very snappy type of frequency, type of percussion, and it pretty much covers that area which the hybrid percussion are not covering, I think. Yeah, a bit, not too much, but yeah. It's better than this. But yeah, say I wanted to improve, like I wanted to give even more snap to this part, I would add more snares and stuff like that, and maybe even boost a little bit of those frequencies in here in the drum kit mixer group. So yeah, when you see your orchestral sections maybe lack a bit of some volume in some bands, you can either layer them with instruments that are much more focused on those ranges, or you can increase the EQ. I suggest layering. Then we have another range, which is pretty much the mid-range, that goes from around 300 to 1K, 2K. And it has mostly, like, the percussion are not that much popular in here. This features mostly in an orchestral setting, you know, the orchestral instruments. Now, orchestral instruments tend to be have a very broad frequency response. So they both populate the mid frequencies and a little bit of the high frequencies here, even a little bit of the low, but depending on their register, they populate one more than the other. So for example, cellos, bass trombones, main choir, those instruments that have a very low register and that they cannot go to very high octaves, they tend to populate the mid-range more than the high range. While instruments like violins, woman choir, or trumpets, they tend to populate the high frequency more because their register allows them to go, like the way those instruments are made allows them to go to higher octaves. So their register is higher, and in turn, their frequency response is higher when you play those high notes on them. So, as I mentioned in other tutorials, the human ear tends to perceive higher pitched instruments more, higher pitched sounds more. So a good practice to do in orchestration is to use the mid, the instruments that populate the mid frequencies more, to use them for the harmonic stuff, while the instrument that populate the high end more, so the most hearable area more, you could use them for the melodies or for what you want to stand out. In here, there's not many melodies going on, but there are some French horns and violin staccati which stand out quite much. And when I isolate the high frequencies, those are the instruments we hear more of. So yeah, those two frequencies, like the from around 300 to 10K or something, you tend to have the instruments, and the first part, like from 300 to 2K, it's the mid range, and from 2K to 10K, it's the high range. And sorry, the mid-high range. And yeah, then we have the highest, like the highs, which are from 10K to 20K, and they represent the sharpness of your track, while the low end represents the boom and the body, the sub. This represents the sharpness. And this is usually not that much populated in terms of organic instruments. Organic instruments do not go as high. What you hear in here are the reflections, the room reverb, and etc., and a bit of the remnants of the frequencies of the instruments, because there is a bit of high end in every instrument, but it's very 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 low in terms of volume. So this is what it sounds like on orchestral instruments. It's just the sharp end of an instrument signal, but generally speaking, orchestral organic instruments populate the mid, high, and the mid frequencies. The high frequencies are usually left for, one, the sharpness of the percussion, also metallic percussion like the anvils we are hearing here, and metallic percussion are also populating the mid, high, and the mid. And mostly high frequencies are used for transitional sounds, so stuff like, for example, cymbals. Like here, for example, you're gonna notice that, like, I am gonna play this part, and in here there are cymbals going on, and they pretty much they help the transition flow more, and they help the track open up in this part here, in this transition we have here. Like in here, it definitely opens up. If we were to take the percussion off, it still opens up because the woman choir is going on, but with the percussion it's even more dramatic. The reason why is the cymbals. The cymbals are populating the high frequency, like the cymbals are very sharp sounds, and they help populate those high frequencies which are usually void. This creates a boost in sharpness, and the ear perceives it as if the track was opening up, as if it was getting more broad, as I mentioned in other tutorials. Now we also have the riser, which serves that same purpose, but the riser pretty much fills every frequency. But the cool thing is that it fills the high as well in a very much bolder way than the orchestral instruments. So yeah, that's another instrument that you can use to fill the high frequencies. And also hats, like hi-hats, open hats, closed hats, fill the high frequencies. Jesus, speaking in English is difficult. But yeah, those are the type of sounds that fill the high frequencies and help the track sound more sharp. Now, the EQ, now that we know how the frequencies work, what every frequency represents, etc., the EQ helps you manage those. So if you want to, for example, make your track, like you can use, as I mentioned at the beginning of the tutorial, or maybe I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. There are multiple ways in which you can use the EQ. I use it in three main ways. One is to alter the type of sound or the quality of sound of my track. Like, for example, I can use it to make the track sound more dull. For example, I'm going to open on a new EQ completely. Yeah, for example, say for example I want the track to sound more dull. Sorry. If I want to do that, a cool thing to do is to either increase the low frequencies or decrease the high frequencies. And when I use EQ like this, I always prefer to decrease rather than increase. I use it to increase, but in other cases. When I want to adjust something, like the overall sound of my track, which is a very sensible thing, you know. If you tweak a track too much in terms of overall EQ in the master, you can destroy your mix. This is very delicate. So for delicate stuff like this, I tend to decrease. So if I want my track to sound more dull, I just decrease a little bit of the high frequencies like this. And this is already way too much, so I just decrease. Like I decrease a wide range, but just a little bit, you know, by one decibel and stuff, you know. This affects a lot of frequencies actually. So while it doesn't look as if it's very dramatic, it does change the quality or color of your track. So decreasing the high frequencies makes it more dull. Increasing them makes the track more sharp. But again, you need to have balance, you know. Another way in which I use it is pretty much similar, but doing it in you know, single instruments. So say for example I want the strings to sound sharper, but the rest I do not want to sound sharper. I just do the same thing in here, but I go on the strings group to do that. You know, I do not increase the high frequencies of the master, I do it in the strings. Or another thing I can do is, for example, we saw in here, was it here? Yeah, we saw there is this frequency which are very loud compared to the sub, which is not good. So now we know like the mid frequencies of the French of the brass and of the strings are way too loud. So one thing we can do is, like, to balance things, is either to decrease the string and brass group like this, but that's gonna decrease even the frequencies which are not too loud of these two instruments. So one thing I can do is I go on the EQ and I decrease those frequencies in here, you know, manually, for the strings and for the brass. This is just a stupid example. I'm not doing it precisely, but you want to be precise. Yeah, I do that. And now it's much more balanced, but it still needs a bit of work, so I go back. And you can, like with EQs, you tend to be able to edit the shape of these adjustments in different ways. For example, in FL Studio you have curves for this is called the width. You can edit the width of the EQ band, or you can edit the frequency where you want it to act, And here you can also edit the type of band. So if I do this, it's going to be different from this. And also you can edit other stuff. For example, if I want this to change in a different, for example, I want this to be not a shelf but a filter. I go here, I click, drag my mouse, and it helps me change the type of shape. And you can do this in every single EQ unit, I think, you know. But yeah, in here I just want to decrease a bit of those mid frequencies, so I use the peaking shape, I think it's called. So yeah, that's one way you can use it. Another cool way you can use it is, for example, say you have the strings, you have an overlap in your strings, which is not happening in this track, I think. But say, for example, we had the violins, the second violins, and I am not happy with a strange overlap that might occur at 1K, you know. Sometimes when you write music with VST orchestral instruments, some notes might be not recorded well, so they have a strange overlap, like you hear a very resonant sound, which is very unpleasant for the ears. When you have that, a cool thing to do is to go in that single instrument channel, and for example, say that overlap is around 1K, you go in your EQ around 1K, and you create a very very precise curve, and just decrease it, you know. What this does, it pretty much kills the volume around this range. Now, this is not the best example because it's not happening here, but in some tracks you might have that type of very resonant, very disturbing sound around some frequencies. Now you know how to fix it. And if you do not know, like if you hear it but you do not know where it is, you can just use this in the inverse way. So you go here and you scout around for it. So in here we hear it, for example. So I just go here, I know it's there, and now I go here and just decrease. And we cannot hear that anymore. Now, as you probably heard, now that we EQ'd the strings like this, this is a very aggressive curve, they do not sound very natural. Like, they sound a bit off compared to this. They sound unnatural, and this is one of the things you need to be careful of. When you're EQing stuff, if you're EQing them too much aggressively and too much with very strange shapes like this, what you tend to do is you tend to alter their nature. Like, they do not sound natural at all anymore. Now, that's something you generally want to avoid doing, because otherwise your tracks are going to sound funny, the instruments are going to sound as if they're not real, you know, which is something you want to avoid. When you're writing orchestral music, you want to be the most realistic as possible. But sometimes this is actually a cool technique to use. This is usually used when you synthesize electronic sounds, because there is no realism. It's so abstract stuff, you can do whatever the fuck you want. But it's also useful in orchestral settings. So say, for example, in here, for example, I did this in the anvils. Let's analyze the anvils. I'm gonna isolate them here. Now, these anvils are actually layered. They are a dulcimer patch and some metal percussion from Metropolis Arc. Now, those two are heavily processed, heavily EQ'd. As you see here, these shapes I drawed, they're not natural at all. And if I were to remove the EQs, this is what they will sound naturally. Which is not the same thing. Like, if you have the whole percussion playing together, you're gonna hear the anvils are pretty much weird. Dulcimer sounds too much in the front, and the anvils are just, I don't know, they're just wrong. So one thing I did is I added some filters. What you see here, this shape here is called filter. This is a high pass filter or low cut filter, whatever you want to like it, to call it. It cuts the low frequencies and only lets the high frequencies pass. And this has a very dramatic effect on any sound and makes it sound much more far away. So for example, the dulcimer without the low pass, without the high pass, sounds like this. While with the high pass, it sounds a bit far away. So we solved the problem of the dulcimer sounding too much closer compared to the percussion, like too close compared to the other percussion. Now I did a bit of the same thing with the anvils, but I had to experiment to make them have the exact sound I wanted. So I have a high pass as well, which is very much more brutal, and then I also increased the high frequencies a lot to make them like this compared to this. So that's an example of using the EQ to alter the nature of a sound for a reason. And then I also have delays and stuff like that on these sounds, so yeah. In this case, using the EQ naturally helped me. But if I did the same thing in other instruments, it might not sound as good, you know? So you want to be careful with it. And yeah, I mentioned filters and high pass and low pass. If you want to activate filters, you go here and you just change the shape, and then you can, you know, use your filter however you want. And filters are not that much used in an orchestral setting because, again, you want to model realism. But they can be cool if you want to make particular stuff like synthesis and stuff like that, which I'm probably going to talk about in other tutorials. However, it is common practice to use filters to help some sounds stand out. So for example, if you want the percussion to stand out, we noticed already that the percussion are much more present in the low end. So one cool thing that people do is that they tend to take all of the sounds which are not that much important in the bass range, and they put a high pass filter on them. So in this example, I'm just going to put a high pass filter on the orchestra. What this does, it completely obliterates the orchestral sounds from the low range, and it leaves it completely empty for the percussion to populate. So you're going to hear the percussion come off much more clearly. Now, this is common practice, but it's not necessarily needed. And you have to keep in mind that some orchestral instrument might need that range. So for example, if you have double basses playing low sustained notes, they are populating the sub. So when you're using high pass filters like that, you need to be sure that you're not using them on the basses as well. So yeah, the good practice is that people take and open an EQ and put a low high pass filter on every single sound they want to remove from that range. Same thing for I don't know, say if you want the percussion to leave space in the mid range as well. Yeah, in this case you wouldn't use a filter, but you would use just a normal curve. But yeah, decreasing the volume of a certain band of a certain instrument, or putting a filter, helps instruments in that same zone stand out more. So yeah, decreasing is actually increasing in a certain sense. Then in some parts you just might want to increase yourself, you know, instead of decreasing everything else. But yeah, it's up to your taste. And that's about it for this tutorial. I think I said everything I wanted to say, but if you have specific questions and there are some, or maybe you want to know about some advanced stuff that I haven't mentioned, just ask away in the comments. But I do suggest you, if you want to learn more about this stuff, to read the mixing and mastering manual from Isotope, or read your DAW manual. There's lots of info in those as well. And yeah, if you want to learn more about orchestral music, subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. And if you have and want to learn more, check out the rest of the tutorials on this channel. There's about something like 6 or 7 hours of tutorials right now on this channel, and some of those you might have not watched yet. So I suggest you to go back and do that. And yeah, share these videos with some composer friends if you have some friends who might earn value out of them. And also, if you want to learn fast how to write cinematic music from very professional composer friends of mine, check out the Resonant courses. The link is in my description. They come at a cost, but they're a really interesting and really intelligent investment to do in yourself if you want to improve your skills and build yourself a career as a composer fast. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial. Alex out.